Packers fans, Aaron Nagler here, Cheesehead TV, joined by a very special guest in Ross Uglem, the publisher of Packer Report. You know him. You follow him on Twitter if you're doing Twitter right as a Packers fan. Ross, how are you today? How's the offseason treating you?
It's, dramatic, if that's, if that's a word.
That works. That works.
My
What
bud
drama in Green Bay? Surely you jest, sir. Surely.
my buddy Jacob Morley, who's a good Packers follow too, he retweeted a tweet from himself in 2019 saying, "Utah State QB Jordan Love would be a fun first-round pick for the
Oh boy.
Packers this spring," and I was like, "I'm not having fun, actually, right now.
There's no fun being had over there?
Not
Well,
I'm not having fun right now."
3 years later? Well, hey, think about being Jordan Love
Yeah, he's
and
definitely that.
having been selected and sat for 3 years. I
Yeah,
mean, who knows? Maybe a fourth year. We're going to make this as Aaron Rodgers as possible
that's fair.
here
Very
today.
fair.
That's where we want to be. It's where we
Yeah,
want to live. We want to live in draft needs because God knows I don't pay attention to the draft. That's why I have people like yourself that can do that for me. And goodness knows if you're not, as I said, following Ross and all of his content over there at Packer Report, you got to do so. Although, sir, I will start this off by saying I take umbrage with your latest mock draft where you have the Packers trading one David Bakhtiari. Sir, this will not stand. This aggression will not stand. Explain yourself.
well, so it's the 7th one, right? We do one every Monday. We
Right.
grab, all the mocks, or I try to link. I'm a friend of other content creators, obviously, but we
Absolutely.
we link to, and we will start to use more also Packers specific mock drafts as far as, guys that are doing Packer, like, Dairyland Express does a good job. Paul Brett will
Absolutely. Paul's the
do,
man.
we'll do Packers specific multi-round mocks, but I'll go to the more famous mocks and find, the Packers picks for round one or round one and
Sure.
two, whatever Dane Brugler's doing, whatever McShay is doing, whatever
Mhm.
Renner's doing at PFF, whatever, and compile those, do my own mock. That's Mock Draft Monday. It's actually a concept I started at Cheesehead TV
Yes, sir.
longer ago than I'd like to admit.
A while ago. No
Uh,
doubt about it.
but the point is, this is the 7th one, right? So I've got maybe 4 where I don't trade Rodgers. I've got 2 where I've trade Rodgers, and now I've got what I call the hard reset, which is where I traded both Bakhtiari and Rodgers, clearing up some financial flexibility and handing the left tackle job to one Zach Tom. And I do draft in that draft. I do draft the right tackle in mammoth 6'8" DeWand Jones from Ohio State. So I don't leave Nijman there or
Right.
whatever, or Elton Jenkins back out there or anything like that. I take care of it there, but I
Right.
understand for sure. But I'll also say, reading even like Jeremy Fowler's recent post on ESPN, they have a decision to make on David Bakhtiari.
Yes, they do.
He I don't think it'll happen, but the idea of Bach as a cap casualty is like a thing. It's not the most likely path, but here I flip a fourth in David Bakhtiari for the Bengals 28th pick. And it's like, if you're gonna consider him maybe a cap casualty, well, grabbing an
Why not
extra.
get something for him?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And that, again, not necessarily what I would do. But it was just an option. All right, here's everything we can get for Rodgers and everything we can get for Bakhtiari. Now what does the squad look like? And so that was
Yeah.
the thought behind it.
And that's what I love. It is a thought exercise, right? And that's why I had it actually on my chat last week. Someone was bemoaning all the mock drafts, and I said it's a conversation starter, and that's the whole point. And hey, look, you have to explore every avenue if you're a general manager, right? As far as what could we do X, Y, Z in this scenario, and that's what you're doing here. And I actually really appreciate it. It is going to be interesting to see whether they, whatever they do with Bakhtiari, contract wise, I think they're definitely going to approach him about some kind of restructure, what have you. But stepping back and let's just assume that the squad is the guys who are on the squad at the moment are going to stay on the squad, not, you know, Bakhtiaris of the world, what have you. Now, we
Yeah.
can probably also assume that all the guys who just had their contracts, voided, like Adrian Amos, Robert Tunyon, whatever, most likely hit the free agent market. For the sake of this video, I just want to ask kind of 30,000-foot view, and obviously this is pre-free agency, all the usual caveats, but if you're standing back and looking at this roster and drafting for the next, 2, 3 years, what have you, where do you see the Packers draft needs lying at this moment? Because I think it is fascinating when you go back and you look at their history. A lot of the norms, quote unquote, that we kind of assumed with Brian Gutekunst, I'm not saying they've been broken or shattered or what have you, but he really went outside a bunch of them last year in the first round, whether it was
Oh,
the off-ball linebacker position, whether it was the age thing with Wyatt. I mean, there were a lot of things and a lot of assumptions that I had, at least as a Packers fan, looking at not only his history but Ted's history and what have you, that really kind of got shook up last year. So with the idea that okay, maybe he's not as easy to peg, easy to kind of nail down as far as what he might do. Where do you, Ross, look at this roster and go, okay, these are their needs, where they absolutely the things they are probably heading into this draft thinking we got to address these positions.
for sure. And um, one thing too, like Christian Watson, by the way, spent 5 years at North Dakota State. He was
Right.
older than a guy that they would normally target.
Yep.
Um, Ted, BG, all those like young freak athletes. That has been the focus. I do the RAS shortlist where I kind of narrow it down, and usually 80-90% of the Packers draft class ends up on that list.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, it was crazy. It was odd to see them, as interested as they were in both first round picks. Devontae Wyatt, as people call him, and old, and Quay Walker, just his position.
Right.
22nd overall. It's not that often the Packers even pick that high. So to go and finally break the mold of we're not pick. No, we don't. We'll grab a Blake Martinez in round 4. We'll grab a uh, my gosh,
Devondre Campbell off the free agent scrap heap.
I'm trying to think of Jake Ryan. I was
Right.
Jack Ryan. Jack Ryan is
He's saving the world
yes, right. That's
each and every week on Amazon.
boy. It's been a day. But
Right. I feel you.
I think one thing that Brian Gutekunst has done well, and sometimes he's doubled up, is sign for need and draft for talent. Now, I, boy, any kind of maneuvering that they're going to be able to do is maybe two decent guys and probably just one. I don't know that. I mean, I'll tell you what, the Billy Turner, Adrian Amos, Darius Smith, Preston Smith spring, that ain't coming. Not
Nope.
coming.
No, sir.
And so the one that I think is obvious to everyone is safety, right? You
Right.
found out that Darnell Savage is probably a slot corner, which I had been banging the drum about forever. And
This is
and
true. You've got the receipts there. There is no doubt about that.
and that Adrian Amos is maybe past his prime, but certainly not on the Green Bay Packers currently. So
Right.
you don't have now. There has been discussion, and it's an interesting one. We've seen plenty of guys do it. Charles Woodson, Rod Woodson, plenty of corners have moved their way back to safety. The idea of Rasul Douglas playing a little free safety, don't hate it. Don't want it necessarily to be plan A, especially if the guy next to him isn't Amos or someone that you've drafted with a top 40 pick that you really like. And yeah, I think they might have found something in Rudy Ford. I don't think he's even under contract though. I
He's
think
set to be a free agent at the
yeah,
moment. Yeah.
right, right. So I think safety is the one that just smacks you in the face. I don't know necessarily how important it is. If we're ranking positional,
Right.
relevance. I'm not saying it's, and I shouldn't even disrespect fullbacks in this way, but I'm not saying it's fullback. I'm not,
Right.
but like it's, I don't know. I don't know that I was, blown away by the safety play of the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know that, the Eagles safeties were something amazing.
Right.
So how important is it? I don't know. But better to have good ones than bad ones. I think that's very simple. Other than that, though, not a ton of needs. Like I think you have some wants. You probably want another edge rusher. But you feel really good about the offensive line situation. Like especially if Nijman comes back, you have three tackles that you like and a guard that can play tackle. You have a young center. You got another project in Sean Ryan that I'm sure they're disappointed in, but not ready to just give up on.
Right.
Uh, Wide receiver room, yeah. If you cut Amari Rogers and you are unlikely to bring back Randall Cobb, I would guess pretty much guarantee Randall Cobb doesn't return if Aaron Rodgers doesn't return. Now slot receiver is a point of contention because you have Watson, who was awesome in the slot, but
Yeah.
you
But he's
also
not a true slot. Like
no,
we know that.
and you
Right.
want him to play X. Like you
Yeah.
want the guy that can beat good outside corners to go out there and beat.
And do it. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
The other one I would say on offense that smacks you in the face is tight end. No
Right.
Tunyon. Mercedes is older than me. Um, and you don't have a young, especially if you consider DeGuara to be an H-back fullback, which I do.
Which is it was clear that that's how they think,
Right.
because of his usage. So yeah, I would chalk that up.
Safety, and then that, but this is, and people are gonna bag on Brian because they went 8 and 9, and maybe the handling of this quarterback situation hasn't been incredibly smooth. But I will say, if you built a roster where people are like, yeah, maybe you could use an edge and safety, tight end, these questions aren't about cornerback. They're not about wide receiver. They're not about left tackle. They're not about quarterback. They're
Mm.
not about these positions where it's like, my God, we just can't figure out like the most important position in pro sports, or can't find a left tackle. We can't find any corners that can play. That's not their issue right now. A lot of that has to do with whether or not Eric Stokes bounces back, I think. But yeah, that's safety and tight end are the ones that kind of smack at you, and it's a pretty good place to be.
No, looking at it, because it was funny, you mentioned earlier, like, some of the national mocks, right? Like, I know Daniel Jeremiah just put out his I think it's his 2nd mock of the season, and I love DJ, I think he does great work, but it was funny to see him having a tight end go
Yeah,
to the Packers at 15, which at first blush, I'm like, "No freaking way, this is goes against, pretty much everything they've ever done," but then, as we were discussing earlier, man, all bets are kind of off
yeah.
after last season. I like really have to sit here and think, all right, well, maybe that's a possibility. And maybe not even Kincaid, who he has going to the Packers. Maybe it's the Notre Dame kid. I don't know. But at this point, I don't expect them to take a tight end in the first round. But I got to tell you, it's not going to knock me over if it happens at this point because of last season. If they were to take, say, a tight end at 15, A, would it shock you? And B, which route do you think they go prospect wise?
I think they'll fall in love with Musgrave from uh, Oregon State, because I think he's going to test like an alien. Is my
Right.
guess.
And
Uh,
they love their testers.
they do,
No question about
they
it.
do. And but here's what I will say. Um, so I did the research yesterday just because I happened to like run across this tight end situation. Not only in the first round, the second round too. Bubba Franks. That's the last time a top 64 pick was used on a tight end by the Green Bay Packers, was Bubba freaking Franks.
And that was only because of the off-field stuff because of Chamora.
Right. Right. So
I mean, that was it. They
yeah.
were not gonna go down that road until the Chamora thing happened.
So you're they just don't do it, right? And the other
Right.
part of they just don't do it is I have kind of put together at least my first crack at a big board. I've been able to watch at least one game of about 200 guys, which is insane. But Green Bay was eliminated early this year, so
Yep. Yeah, a
that's
lot of time on our hands, no doubt.
that's time. And I've got one, two, three, four, five tight ends in my top 64, which would be the first two
Wow.
rounds. In fact, Sam Laporta from Iowa is my 64th ranked player. So moving up from him, making my way to the top guy, it's Laporta, and then Darnell Washington from Georgia, Kincaid, and then Musgrave, and then Mayer from Notre Dame.
Right.
So hey, talk to me about pick 45? Okay.
Right.
Also, though, you give me pick 7 or pick 13 in an Aaron Rodgers deal, all of a sudden now I'm thinking differently about pick 15. Maybe if
Sure.
I can go get
Right.
my steak at 7 or 13 and get a premium like a Skoronski, like a or a
Right.
one of the 3 edge rushers that I'm in love with this edge class, but the kid from the Texas Tech kid, and then Murphy and Will Anderson, if they could get their hands on one of those to pair him with Gary. But I'm just talking about like premium position. There also is a Jair clone in this class. Uh,
Hello.
Devin Witherspoon from Illinois. Watch him and think about Jair Alexander. And then think about Joe Barry playing both of them 9 yards off the line of
Why you gotta depress me, man?
yeah,
Honey, hey, the draft is a time of hope, man. Don't bring me down.
just walk into the East River until death takes you.
It's so
But
true. It's
but
so
but
true.
outside, I mean,
Oh,
give
man.
me the stake of the premium position, right, with whatever they get for Rodgers. Then you can talk to me about a fun idea at 15, like a tight,
Right. Right.
or like a Quentin Johnson, or like a Jackson Smith and Jibba from, and I need to learn how to say his third name, I think.
I think we all do.
JSN. Everybody calls him JSN, from who is your kind of your Juju Smith-Schuster, in that he's not a jitterbug slot, and he's not
Mhm.
an enormous slot like a Colston or
Right.
a what they would have tried to probably do with, the Notre Dame Claypool, that like a
Right.
big slot, right? He's just kind of your guy that you don't necessarily line up outside, but he wins a ton, like a Cooper Cup, like a now, slow down. I'm not
I
telling
know, right? I hear you though, but it's
when
an easy reference point. I
right,
get what you're
a
saying.
normal sized 6-foot receiver that excels in the slot that would be an awesome guy to pair with a Dubs and a Watson.
Right.
So that if you can get me an extra top 20 pick for Rodgers, I can talk about a little sizzle with one of those picks. If you're going to tell me that you're just going to burn 15 on a tight end and I got to wait till 45 again, I
Yeah.
start that's a question.
And that's what I don't that's where I'm like, I just can't fathom that happening. That's where I because of the fact that it would be I mean, you're taking a tight end and then waiting how long until you pick again? It just feels very unpackers. Like, it
And
feels very unusual.
and think about the guys that have been taken super high, right? Like Fant, he
Mhm.
okay.
Yep.
Hawkinson, he's all right. He good, very good.
He's
Not
been traded already.
I'm
I
not
mean, you know?
I'm not hating, but
Right.
all right. Um, you talk about Michael Mayer. Think about every Notre Dame tight end taken in the top 20. And I'm a guy that yells and screams and bitches and moans about helmet scouting, but like I'm just saying, think about your
Yep.
Rudolph, think about your John Carlson, think about are they good players? Yeah, they're good.
Fine players, but none of them are transformational. I
No, and
mean,
so
not a one.
am I doing that at 15?
Right.
In what
This is where I'm living.
right.
Exactly.
In where what I'm hoping the program that I'm building is like Ted's program where we usually pick between 25 and 30, you know,
Right.
like
Right.
and,
It's the dream.
and that's where and I was ticked. I wanted Brian Burns, but they knocked that out of the park with Rashawn Gary. Oh,
Yeah, they did.
we stunk. We're gonna pick 12. All right, here is a space age
Well,
edge rush.
yes, yes, and this is something I wanted to ask about because it is likely, in my mind, that we get there on draft day and they haven't traded it or whatever, and they're sitting there at 15, right?
Yeah,
There should be 0 surprise, I would think, if they end up maybe even, quote, "doubling up" or making a pick that feels redundant for Packers fans simply because of the positional value and or the upside at a certain position. Like traditionally, you've mentioned it, corner, offensive tackle, the positions that the Packers deem premium where until last season, last draft, literally almost back to 2019, you can go and look at those positions and say, this is the box you want to select from if you're the Green Bay Packers.
and I tell you what's interesting. So and I'm trying to make my brain not work this way, but like I think that I have loved JSN maybe more, or even from a ranking perspective, because I salivate about what he would be able to do in a different part of the field that you can't see my hands. I'm doing a lot of hand talk. What he would be able to do in a different part of the field than Watson, right?
Right.
So the consensus number one guy who I like is Quentin Johnson from TCU, who is Watson. And so I'm like, okay, do they pick Watson again? And
Maybe.
would that be cool? Yeah, it would be cool. That's what I'm thinking like
Right.
the fit is the slot receiver. The
Right.
fit is to do something cool with JSN. But what or a Jordan Addison, I think would be a very similar guy, though I think his size,
I was going to say he's a little under the prototype, I would think, for the Packers, but
Matt's
you never know.
yeah, I don't think Matt's gonna want him to run block. But anyway, my point is
Right.
like I think you do get kind of pigeonholed in your thought process where it's like, boy, JSN would be cool. But then it's like, well, if Quentin Johnson is just a better prospect, then just take him. And if your problem is you have 2 6'4" freaks on the outside, and one of them has to be guarded by the opponent's second best corner, that's a great
That's it.
problem to have.
That is it.
And,
Right.
and so you're trying to kind of create this perfect roster, this perfect puzzle. And it's like, and I don't know what their grading system is, but if they have a 90 grade on Quentin Johnston and they have an 85 grade on JSN, probably just take Johnston.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. What's funny too is like you're talking about a receiver, right? And wouldn't surprise me. Although again, history would suggest
Yeah,
that,
right,
you
that
know, first round probably isn't going to happen. But
yeah.
you know what wouldn't surprise me is if they end up there at 15 and an offensive tackle falls to them. I think they make that selection real easily. Like they had like I do think they can go into next season with what they have on hand as far as the offensive line goes. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if there's a prospect there that they like
Boy,
who's
man.
an offensive tackle, they snatch it up.
And he's a legacy kid. Skaronski.
Oh, that's Skoronski, yeah. The heat around this kid is, like, so much that I'm like, A, no way he'll be there, but B, even if he is, there's gotta be something wrong. Like,
Because
it just feels too easy.
so who Skaronski is to me is Zach Martin
Oh,
from
that's
Notre
good.
Dame.
Right.
So, like, do I want him playing tackle? Maybe. You know? I
Right.
wanna play I know I want him playing right tackle,
Yes.
but
Which is probably where the Packers want somebody to play.
sure. But if it doesn't go super well there, I think he's like a 10-time all-league guard. I do. I think, Zach Martin in a pinch probably could play tackle for the Cowboys if they desperately needed someone to do that.
Right.
But Skaronski, man, I think you could get maybe above average right tackle play, and if not, just set it and forget it with him and Elton. We're talking sitting and Lang, and I
Yeah.
know that
Right.
that's like maybe blasphemous, but we're talking like you just have 2 all pro guards, and whatever that does for your football team,
I
go.
mean, it can only help. You look at the problems they had last year, a lot of it was along the interior, and it's funny because now we're sitting here, got a full year of Myers under your belt, and you're thinking, man, that miss on Creed
Freedom.
Humphrey
Yeah.
is tough to take. And look, who knows what the draft will entail as far as the day 3 picks, which they've been selecting offensive linemen like fire,
Yeah.
essentially every draft with Brian. And it wouldn't surprise me if they brought someone in or had someone on hand, maybe a Zach Tom, maybe Elton, giving Myers a little run for his money as far as competition goes, because you've got to get better play along the interior, all 3 of those positions next season, because that was where a lot of their issues were throughout this past season. Where it's like you can talk about Rodgers, you can talk about the inexperience of wide receiver, but man, there were so many games, especially early in the year, where the offensive line play just was not up to snuff, and that is not something that we have grown accustomed to in Green Bay.
Which makes and is part of why I traded Bakhtiari in the mock draft is because I don't think Zach Tom can play guard. I think there's just not enough.
I think it's his weakest position.
So, like,
Yep.
and maybe it's center, and maybe that's great. But then, what the hell did you do with Myers with a second round pick? By the
Yep.
way,
Yep.
but I do think that Zach Tom's best position is left.
Left tackle. I said the exact same thing yesterday in my chat. I totally agree. But like, if you've got David sitting there,
Right.
you're
And
not playing left tackle anytime soon.
I think you can play Zach Tom at right tackle and be very happy about
Agreed.
it. But that's whatever. But like, just I'm thinking of almost of as a Madden perspective. It's like, okay, what are my best resources?
Yeah.
Try my all pro left tackle. Well, do I have a left tackle? I do actually, and he makes almost no money. And that was
Right.
kind of the thought process,
Yep. I feel you. I feel you.
got into that.
It's going to be interesting to watch play out. We could talk all day, but I'm not going to keep you. I know you have a snowstorm coming in,
Yes.
ready to snow you in, and I'll have plenty of opportunities as you get further and further down the road as Jack Torrance, you're in your own home. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Ross, I can't thank you enough for all the draft insight, all the work you do at Packer Report. Packers fans everywhere really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again later down this offseason, probably post free agency. We'll check back in and see what you're thinking as far as draft needs for the Green Bay Packers. Make sure you check out Ross's work at Packer Report. Ross, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate it.